Okay, so I think it's about 3 years ago, just before I started my channel, maybe 4, I really have lost track of time, but in the last year of high school, I went to America on a band tour. This band tour started at Los Angeles, moved over to a few other cities, and eventually ended up in New York. My memory's a little bit fuzzy on it, but I remember having a much better time than the first one. Whilst I was there, I decided to visit what was supposedly one of the biggest Toys R Us's on the planet, in New York Times Square, and that was actually before it shut down, which itself was long before Toys R Us entered bankruptcy. And whilst I was there, I was actually looking for the Bionicle sets. I didn't end up finding them there, I ended up finding them at a Target down the street, but I did notice a few small Transformers figures. Back then I was actually on hiatus from collecting Transformers. I had gotten into Warhammer and it was simply getting too expensive to collect Transformers as well. It was about a 5-year hiatus, I think? I'm not sure. Probably was less. RID was in full swing at the time, and they recently had some new Legion figures on display. And yes, they're sticking with the Legion class from Cyberverse, not Legends. Yeah, confusion continues. I got my start in the franchise through Legion figures, through Blackout, as I've mentioned earlier. So I thought, why not dip my toe in and see what all the fuss is about? And oh boy, am I glad I did. So between Optimus Prime and Strongarm, Optimus Prime clearly has the better engineering, and that's why it resonated with me so much. Eventually from that, I started getting into which Transformers had more complex engineering. I bought Springer, then I bought some KOs, although I reviewed them the other way around, and the rest is history. Optimus Prime here is of course inspired by the Star Convoy design, as I've already outlined in the Wei Jiang knockoff review. It's a very cool design. This truck mode's different enough from the Star Convoy design to be its own thing, but it's got a lot of callbacks. Of course the transformation they have on this version is a bit further removed, but because of that we get two incredibly accurate modes. The paint is somewhat minimal, but it gets across the points enough so that you know what it is. You've got a black window there, of course, nothing on the wheels, and at this point the wheels were always being clipped to save on budget, which is a bit of a shame, but it's nice that they've painted the smokestacks here. They've also got some thigh paint to break up the sculpt. When you get back here, it does look a little messy, to be honest. When you get back here, it does look a little messy, to be honest, with the blue arms and the feet just sticking out. But again, this is a Legends toy. As I've said with all the other figures, you gotta make some concessions for it. It's actually quite tiny, though. Comparing him next to a standard Micromaster, you can see he's a lot thinner than most Legends figures, or Legion figures at this point. At this point, they really hammered in how that these were supposed to be much smaller figures. Of course, the Bumblebee movie ones did get a little bit bigger, but not much. But the vehicle mode isn't where this guy shines. This guy really shines in his robot mode and his transformation. Don't get me wrong, the vehicle mode is pretty damn good, but it's not the highlight of the figure. The first thing you do is take the entire truck cab and bring it up here, and it's just a huge piece of kibble. And that's a bit disappointing. Untab this part here, bring it down on a series of hinges. It's on a double hinge here. The arms open up, rotate around, and then fold down on these parts here. And this bit flops around quite a bit, but don't worry, because if you bring up the head and clip it in, it stays in place. And from here you can separate the legs and stand him up quite easily. He is very easy to stand up. He's got some rather good feet to stand on. And wow, they really captured his likeness very well in this mode. In fact, I'd say it looks slightly better than the deluxe version or the upscale deluxe version because of the proportions. I mean, it's not really screen accurate. For example, you've got the wheels on the outside as opposed to on the inside of the legs, and you've got the huge backpack, but that is a damn good Optimus design. Of course, there is one gripe, but I can probably fix it. It is this little sticker right here. All the Robots in Disguise figures had this. On the larger figures it was less noticeable because it was in the same size, just in a different proportion. But what it does is you scan it into an app and then it activates some sort of video game thing. Not really sure why, it's kind of pointless. I'm not even sure if the video game's still running at the moment. It could have been shut down a long time ago. Only a few of them actually have sculpting in there, that means if you take it off it'll look ugly. For example, this one is just a completely flat surface, and on camera for the first time, I'm going to peel the sticker off, just like I did with the Windblade review back in the day. I don't really I don't really do the same things like that anymore because there's not much to talk about in terms of small-scale figures. It doesn't fill out a video. But as you can see, there is absolutely no reason to not take off the sticker. I can always put an Autobot symbol there later, and I will put an Autobot symbol there later, after the video, but for now, I'll just leave it as is. Articulation's okay. You've got ball joints here that also go up, you've also got outward arms, and you've got ball-jointed legs. You've got a bit of an ab crunch, but it looks kind of weird. And you don't need much on him, though, because he looks fantastic in an A stance. That looks like a powerful leader, as he ought to. The RID Legions were passable to fantastic. Several of them were brilliant, and a few of them were just kind of okay. I don't really think there were any stinkers aside from the Cyclonus one. I'm really disappointed that Cyclonus turned out pretty terrible. Doubly so because I overpaid for him in London. And as usual, my size comparison with Crumbs. He is, again, pretty small for a Legion figure because they've shrunk them down. But because of that, we've gotten far more complex engineering, which is brilliant. I really like what they did with this line, and I hope they manage to have more complex Legion figures later down the line as well. Because the Bumblebee movie ones weren't that complicated, unfortunately. They were fine, but they weren't fantastic. Well, actually, there was one that was fantastic from last night, but I'll get to that tomorrow. It's not even nostalgia because it's not far back enough. This guy genuinely is a really, really good Optimus Prime toy. The back might be a little messy, but he is incredibly screen accurate, has some great paint, and a very fun transformation. If I didn't buy this, I probably wouldn't have gotten back into collecting Transformers. I would probably have been wasting my money on Warhammer 40,000, and I never would have made this YouTube channel, and I never would have met the friends that I've met today. So, I owe it all to this guy. This guy set me back on the right track, and for that, I am very grateful. Well, this guy and Strong Arm, but I don't want to review 2 RID toys this year because I kind of had to do more of the older toys. I'll probably review Strong Arm next year. But until that day, no rest for the wicked. Tomorrow we go towards the last night. And although the toy line itself was pretty bad, I'll have to see if this guy is as bad as the rest.